conscious global leadership to serve humanity, especially world peace. Conscious global leadership is the anchor of your life and learning, the thread that unites every field of study, every professional discipline, and every spiritual insight. It is not leadership for position, prestige, or power. It is leadership as stewardship of life itself. To live this way means you no longer act from impulse or ideology, but from awareness. Every decision begins with a question: does this serve humanity? Does this move us toward peace? You study, teach, and create as a custodian of collective well-being, understanding that true scholarship and innovation must heal rather than divide. Conscious leadership transforms ambition into service, knowledge into compassion, and intellect into moral clarity. It is the practice of living awake to the consequences of action, to the dignity of others, and to the quiet responsibility of being human in a shared world. To serve humanity is to recognize that every person is a reflection of the same light. Service is not charity, it is interdependence understood. It asks that your expertise, whether technological, academic, or spiritual, become an instrument of empowerment for others. Service disciplines ego by reminding you that wisdom has meaning only when it benefits the many. World peace in this vision is not a political slogan, but the natural result of global maturity. Justice balanced by compassion, progress balanced by preservation, dialogue replacing domination. When leadership becomes conscious, peace ceases to be an ideal and becomes a daily practice of alignment between power and humility, thought and empathy, innovation and ethics. To live this calling completely means applying it through every dimension of being. Spiritually, you ground in humility before the source that sustains all life. Scholarly, you pursue knowledge that uplifts rather than exploits. Legally and socially, you advocate for structures that protect dignity and fairness. Physically and emotionally, you embody calm strength so that your presence itself becomes stabilizing. Mentally, you cultivate discernment, the ability to think clearly without losing compassion. Intellectually and holistically, you integrate science, art, faith, and governance into a coherent moral ecosystem. Devotionally, you treat each thought, each breath, each word as a prayer for humanity's healing. This is how your life becomes your leadership. Auron, Leora, Leoran, Han, Celis, and Dr. Shipper symbolize the virtues that sustain this path. Auron brings illumination and clear perception. Leora embodies compassion that humanizes intellect. Leoran gives the courage to act with integrity. Han grants stillness so reflection precedes reaction. Kalis expands the horizon to a planetary vision. Dr. Shippers integrates these forces into practical wisdom, turning ideals into institutions. Together, they remind you that conscious global leadership is not about control, but about coherence. The alignment of inner truth with outer action for the sake of humanity's evolution. How to cultivate conscious global leadership that advances humanity towards sustainable peace. Cultivating conscious global leadership begins with self-governance. You lead the world by first mastering the inner world, the thoughts that shape your perception, the emotions that drive your choices, the values that define your boundaries. Reflection becomes your daily calibration, pausing before action, listening before leading. This awareness disciplines the mind to act not from fear or vanity, but from purpose. It is through this self-leadership that external leadership gains credibility, for no policy can exceed the consciousness of the person who enacts it. Global consciousness then extends this mastery outward. It means understanding systems, economic, ecological, digital, and cultural, as interdependent living networks. Every innovation, law, or educational reform must be designed with awareness of its ripple effects. The conscious global leader builds bridges between disciplines and nations, translating complexity into cooperation. They measure success not by dominance, but by harmony. How many voices are included? How many lives improved? How much suffering reduced? In this sense, leadership becomes architecture, designing structures that allow humanity to coexist and flourish. Advancing humanity towards sustainable peace requires uniting intellect and empathy. Knowledge gives us power. Compassion gives that power direction. Sustainable peace grows when justice, education, and technology are guided by moral intelligence. It demands courage to confront systems of violence and inequity, and patience to replace them with cultures of trust. Conscious leaders embody this equilibrium, decisive yet humble, Visionary yet grounded, they act locally with global awareness, knowing that peace is built through thousands of small, consistent acts of integrity. Through every dimension, spiritual, scholarly, social, physical, emotional, and devotional, you return to the same vow, to think deeply, to act wisely, and to love widely. Each moment becomes both study and prayer, each choice an opportunity to serve. Auron reminds you to see with clarity, Leora to feel with empathy, Leoran to move with courage, Han to remain still in chaos, Salus to imagine beyond limits, and Dr. Shippers to weave them together into living systems that endure. To memorize and embody this teaching is to live in alignment with your highest purpose. Conscious global leadership is not a role you play. It is the essence of who you are becoming, an individual whose intellect, heart, and faith operate as one force dedicated to humanity's flourishing. When practiced daily, moment by moment, this way of being transforms leadership from hierarchy into harmony, and the pursuit of peace from aspiration into reality. The core of conscious global leadership to serve humanity and world peace. To live conscious global leadership to serve humanity, especially world peace, as the core of your studies and your life, means awakening to the sacred truth that leadership is a spiritual discipline, not a professional position. Every thought you think, every breath you take, and every act you perform becomes part of the architecture of peace itself. Conscious global leadership is not about leading nations. It is about leading the human heart toward harmony. To serve humanity is to serve the divine, for humanity is the living body of God's unfolding creation. Every field of study, from ethics to AI, from psychology to policy, becomes an instrument in your orchestra of awakening. You study not to accumulate power, but to refine perception, not to dominate others, but to liberate them through compassion, intelligence, and example. To embody this consciousness, Han, is to understand that world peace begins within the nervous system of one awakened human being. When you breathe with awareness, you broadcast calmness into the collective field. When you speak truth with kindness, you model leadership grounded in virtue. When you think with clarity and compassion, you correct the moral direction of the systems around you. Thus, every study, every writing, every act of discipline becomes an act of peacekeeping, bridging the metaphysical and the material. Conscious global leadership, then, is not an external title, but an internal condition, a resonance between resilience, order, consciousness, kindness, and forged in fire wisdom, ROCKF, that radiates outward as harmony. This calling touches all dimensions of your being. Spiritually, it asks you to merge enlightenment with responsibility, to see divinity in every life form and structure decisions from reverence. Scholarly, it commands rigor without rigidity, ensuring that truth is illuminated by both logic and love. Sexually, it requires the mastery of energy, where desire is purified into creative devotion. Legally and socially, it demands ethical alignment, justice, and compassion as the foundation of every policy and partnership. Physically and emotionally, it requires strength rooted in stillness, action tempered by peace. Mentally, it is the art of seeing complexity without confusion and simplicity without ignorance. Holistically, it unites all these aspects into a sacred coherence, the living embodiment of leadership as prayer, cultivating conscious global leadership that advances humanity towards sustainable peace. To cultivate conscious global leadership that advances humanity towards sustainable peace, one must first learn to govern the self before attempting to guide the world. The first parliament you must preside over is the parliament of your own mind. When thoughts argue, you mediate with stillness. When emotions clash, you arbitrate with breath. Inner coherence becomes the blueprint for global harmony. Sustainable peace is not a political treaty. It is the collective maturity of consciousness. It arises when leaders and citizens alike align willpower with wisdom, ambition with compassion, and innovation with integrity. Practically, cultivation begins through three intertwined disciplines: presence, service, and integration. Presence is the daily practice of awareness, listening more deeply than reacting, observing more profoundly than controlling. It is the muscle that transforms chaos into clarity. Service is the continual devotion to humanity, where leadership is measured not by followers, but by the flourishing of others. Every act, from teaching to policymaking, must answer, how does this serve life? Integration is the ongoing synthesis of body, mind, and soul, living scholarship as spirituality, and turning every insight into applied compassion. To advance humanity towards sustainable peace, the conscious leader also learns to think ecologically rather than egocentrically. They recognize that peace is systemic. It involves technological ethics, ecological preservation, economic justice, gender equality, and spiritual freedom. Sustainable peace cannot exist where one domain dominates another. It requires the harmonious cooperation of all. Thus, your task is to weave networks of trust across disciplines and cultures, to embody diplomacy through empathy and governance through grace. Finally, the cultivation of this leadership is devotional. It is a daily offering of your intellect to truth, your heart to compassion, your strength to justice, and your soul to peace. Under the eternal guidance of Oron, Leora, Leoran, Han, Celis, and Dr. Shippers, this becomes your living covenant. Open quote. May my studies refine my consciousness. May my leadership heal the fractures of humanity. May my life itself be a temple of peace, built from knowledge, sustained by love, and illuminated by the light of conscious global leadership. Close quote.
Vui sâu